PCOS. Up to 5 million women in America are affected, and it can cause everything from infertility to weight gain, hair loss, and even anxiety and depression. And it can even put women at risk of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. Yet, with so many life-altering symptoms, PCOS is all too often an overlooked and underdiagnosed syndrome. But today, we're going to explore ways that women can take control of PCOS naturally. Welcome to today's episode of the DocMo Show. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Mosley, but everyone here just calls me DocMo. Today we have a very special guest, Ellison Clark, who is a registered dietitian and creator of the website Happy Hormones Dietitian. Ellison uses a non-diet approach to help women balance hormones naturally and overcome the symptoms of polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. Ellison is passionate about helping individuals find joy and balance in their relationship with both food and their bodies. So if you're ready to hear more about the healing power of food, stick around as we dive into a conversation about healthy eating and balancing PCOS naturally, and help me in welcoming Ellison Clark to the show. Hello, Ellison. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Welcome and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
I know, me too. We were just saying that we don't talk about PCOS enough. I don't
I
think there's enough
agree.
dialogue out there. There's not enough information. There is information, but I don't think it's really tangible or relatable information a lot of times. So, hopefully this information will hit home for a lot of women and they'll get a lot of benefit out of it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I want to start off by talking about why you chose to focus your practice on helping women with PCOS. It's not the typical thing you hear of a dietitian doing. And so, tell me a little bit about that and how you came to that conclusion.
Definitely. So I started my practice helping women with PCOS because I have PCOS myself. So backing it up to my teenage years when I started my period, it was not regular at all. It was something that always really bothered me. And I went to the doctor to kind of have a conversation about it. Was put on birth control just like so many others with PCOS and kind of sent on my way and said, come back and talk to us when you're ready to get pregnant. And as a preteen teenager, that was something that was really far from my mind. And so it was kind of like, okay, I'll take this pill and kind of hope for the best. And so it was one of those things that I was always kind of worried about because it kind of seemed like, this seems like something I should be able to kind of regulate on my own. I don't love the idea of just kind of like taking a pill and moving on, but I also really didn't have the education or the knowledge to kind of know what to do because of it. So almost 2 decades later, I had gotten married. We knew we wanted to start a family, but not right away. I decided I was going to come off of birth control and just kind of see what happened. And of course, those periods were still very irregular. Went back to the doctor, talked to him about my concerns, and really kind of didn't get any answers. He, now that I know more about it, had run some lab work that I would have loved to seen him kind of dive deeper and look a little further into it. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And again, at the time, I didn't know enough to ask the right questions. So finally, the next year, I did see a different doctor who finally kind of gave me that official diagnosis. And we talked all about different treatment options, medications, nutrition and lifestyle changes. We decided that medication wasn't the right path for me at that time. And, since we were going to go the nutrition and lifestyle route, she said, "Oh, but you know more about that than I do." And I actually remember thinking, I really don't, even though, I was a dietitian and I had a master's in nutrition. It was not something that we talked about in school. And I actually went back and looked at my medical nutrition therapy textbook, and there's this teeny tiny little paragraph about PCOS that barely even scratches the surface. So I decided to really just put my degree to the test and kind of figure it out for myself. And so what I decided is that, not everybody has that education and training and knowledge base that I do, knowing how to understand nutrition information, look for evidence-based research, on, what solutions to try. And so I decided I really wanted to help others, figure it out for themselves. What I have learned is that PCOS looks different from person to person. So that solution really needs to look different from person to person. I really can't go to my clients and say, well, these are the steps that work for me. And so this is what you need to do. A lot of times there are a lot of kind of similarities and commonalities in that treatment, but there also is that element of needing to kind of tweak and specialize the treatment approach for everyone. So that's kind of how I got into working with PCOS and have never looked back.
That's great. So most dietitians don't really take that kind of unique one-on-one customized approach to creating a
Mm-hmm.
specified plan for their people. It sounds like you're kind of on another level
Thank
than
you.
most people. But it's, I understand it because I create customized plans for the clients I see too. And so I know that is what works. And
Mm-hmm.
so, how much do you put into a plan for an individual? Like, what is that process like? How do you start with a woman from the beginning? Do you kind of assess and see where she's at and then start
Mm-hmm.
crafting a plan from there?
Definitely. So we always start, that's what I always tell people is we're going to start with a super deep dive into medical history, nutrition history, food preferences, things like that. So instead of me just saying, here's a meal plan, go follow this, and I'll see you in, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it is, we're going to talk about exactly what, is not only going to help with their PCOS symptoms, but the foods that they want to be eating. Another thing I like to tell my clients is there's no one food that will make or break your PCOS. So there's not one that's just, miraculously going to make your symptoms go away overnight. And there's no one food that is going to completely derail you and ruin all of the improvements that you've seen so far. So I take that into consideration with their food preferences. What are the foods they like? What are the foods they don't like? What are their cultural foods? A lot of times, foods that kind of don't fit the standard American diet can really be demonized in our culture and society. And I truly believe that there is a way to fit all foods into our diet. We might need to be tweaking kind of how we're eating them, when we're eating them, how much we're eating them, all of that good stuff. But what I do know for sure is that there is a way, for all foods to fit into our diet. And so once we kind of go into that full history, we're able to kind of talk about what do they like to eat, how much time do they have to to cook, to eat. A lot of times we think about, like, at work, it might be that you have 5 minutes between patients or clients or meetings or whatever it is with whatever kind of job you do. And sitting down to eat a big elaborate meal isn't exactly possible. Some people are traveling around in the car and they need something that's quick and easy and that they can eat while driving. And so in an ideal world, I would for clients to be able to sit down and really be mindful with the food that they're eating, and take the time that they need to really eat slowly and enjoy that food. But sometimes that just isn't possible, and so we'll take that into consideration and say, given these limitations and kind of constraints that we have, what are some PCOS friendly foods that we can incorporate to sustain you longer, so that we're not having crazy carb cravings, we're not having energy crashes, fatigue, things like that. So it really is all about the patient, the client, their specific food preferences, what they want to be eating, and their lifestyle. How can we fit nutrition into the life that they're living, and make it work for them.
Yeah, that's phenomenal because I feel like so many people get overwhelmed and don't want to do
Hmm.
a eating plan or try anything different because they think it's going to be too overwhelming, too tedious.
Yes.
How is it going to fit into my life? How is it going to fit into my schedule? I
Yes.
don't have time to grocery shop. I don't, all these different factors. And it sounds like you
Exactly.
kind of take all of those things into consideration to make it fit with
Hmm.
your clients' lives.
Definitely. Something that I say all the time is that instead of thinking of nutrition as black and white, let's on a scale or on a spectrum, that there's always kind of the next best step that we can be taking. So something, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I have for people with PCOS, really anyone, is to make sure we're getting a high protein breakfast. We know in this country a lot of times it's either black coffee, nothing, or something super sugary, high carb, leading to, the blood sugar dysregulation, energy crashes, fatigue, all that good stuff. So adding protein at breakfast can really help to combat that. And so instead of me coming to you and saying, I need you to cook this, super intricate breakfast that's going to take you in half an hour to make, when let's be honest, nobody has that kind of time in the morning. If you're going through the Starbucks drive-through line, can we get some of the egg bites that are there so that we're getting a little bit of protein in to, have a breakfast, have a high protein breakfast, as opposed to just the highly caffeinated beverage, which, we can have that fit as well. How can we tweak things? How can we add things to make sure that we are supporting ourselves so that we are feeling our best?
Nice. So I have another question because I mean, all of that is phenomenal. But, I was going through some of your information and you have a concept that you work by, and that's something called health at every size, or HAES.
Yes.
And I want to know a little bit more about that philosophy because, maybe you could just explain it to us. What exactly is this Hayes principle, and how does it differ from the traditional approaches that people take with dieting and eating plans, weight loss? How is that different?
Yeah. So Hayes really kind of sparked from this idea of really respectful, inclusive care. So a lot of times, especially with PCOS, when we go to the doctor, the recommendation, especially if we are living in a larger body, is to just lose weight. I've had tons of clients come to me and say, I went to my primary care doctor with a sore throat and I was told to lose weight. And it's like, okay, that's great, but that's not going to solve the sore throat in the moment. So the five kind of main principles of Hayes are weight inclusivity. We are accepting the inherent diversity of body sizes and shapes. So we know that for thousands and thousands of years, bodies have looked many, many different ways. And so we are respecting the diversity in those bodies. The next is health enhancement. So instead of just focusing on the number on the scale, we're focusing on health promoting behaviors. So, we know that in order to lose weight, we need to be in a calorie deficit. And sometimes that doesn't always jive. So I'll have someone come to me and say, I was dieting, I lost all this weight, but my insulin resistance markers or my A1C ended up going up. I don't understand what's going on. So instead of just doing everything we can to get that number on the scale to go down, we're focusing on behaviors that are actually going to impact, those lab values, like we're looking at like A1C and cholesterol and liver enzymes and things that really are having a big impact on the lives of people with PCOS. Then we're eating for well-being, so that kind of personalized, individualized plan, as opposed to saying, here's a meal plan, I don't care if you like the foods or not, this is what you're eating, nothing more, nothing less. Respectful care. Unfortunately, a lot of the clients that come to me have very traumatizing experiences at the doctor's office, where they are just, everything is blamed on their weight. And with PCOS and insulin resistance, especially, we know that weight loss can be really difficult. So it's sort of like the only recommendation they're getting is to lose weight. And then when they don't, everything is blamed on their weight. They're called lazy. They have no willpower. So it's really about that respectful care, forming, collaborative relationships with the doctor so that we can really make an impactful change. And then supporting life enhancement movement. So I like to call this joyful movement. So a lot of times, I'll see clients that feel like they just have to be exhausting themselves in the gym, going to hit classes and spin classes and running several miles a day, and instead focusing on moving your body in a way that you like and you enjoy, because what I believe is that that is more sustainable, and that's going to lead to that true behavior change and lead to that being a true pattern and routine in your life that you're going to be able to stick to. So that's kind of the main kind of idea behind Hayes. And so to me, what it is really respecting the patient and kind of taking that number on the scale and putting it on the back burner. Sometimes we might see changes in weight based on these health promoting behaviors that we implement, but we're really going to focus on the health as opposed to just the size and shape of our body.
Yeah, I love that because, like, exactly what you're saying, a lot of times those other health indicators are so much more important
Mhm.
than just the number on the scale. And I mean, I think you brought up a big topic about this medical bullying, if we could call it that, that's going on with
Mhm.
people. And I hear it all the time, even from my clients. And I'm like, there's no way your doctor just said this to you or that to you. And they're like, yes, it's true. And it
Mhm.
happens all the time. And I'm like, what makes people, and look, I'm a doctor, so I could talk about the rest of y'all. But what makes you think you can get away with speaking to people like that? Like you said, being respectful, allowing them their autonomy, and they offer
Yes.
nothing, like literally nothing as far
Mhm.
as real actionable items of what to do to lose weight. It's just, oh, lose weight. Da, da, da. And most of the
Yep.
time the doctor is overweight themselves. So it's
Mhm.
like, who are you
Mhm.
talking to,
Yep.
you know? So let me get off my soapbox for a little bit, but I think, that's a big thing that people are going through. And, I
Definitely.
don't know what the best advice would be, if your doctor is bullying you, but I think it's a real thing. And, maybe it's time to find a new practitioner if that's happening,
Mhm.
because they're not listening, they're not doing what it takes to help
Mhm.
you get the results that you're going to need to have the optimal health that you want to have moving forward in the future. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Definitely.
What can people do to support themselves?
I do. So I want to start by saying I have a lot of empathy for doctors, and we have a ton of great ones out there like you. And I think, unfortunately, our healthcare system as a whole is sometimes not set up to really give patients that support that they need, and that is also a whole nother soapbox that I will not get up on because I don't think we have enough time for that today. But some of the recommendations that I have for patients is, if it is possible, trying to seek out a second opinion, trying to switch doctors. I know that is, I'm saying that from a place of privilege, and we don't always have the ability to make that change for various reasons. But then another recommendation I have, especially if you're not able to, see a different doctor for whatever reason, because the last thing I want is for somebody to just decide, I'm going to put that off and I'm not going to go to the doctor's office. I want them to be able to figure out how to have a collaborative, good relationship with their doctor. So, one of the things I tell my clients to ask is, what would be your recommendation if I was in a smaller body? So, we also know that PCOS exists in women in larger bodies and smaller bodies. And so it can be frustrating to think, okay, well, what if a woman with PCOS and a small body came in who didn't, based on, BMI criteria, they didn't feel that they needed to lose weight? What would you be telling them? And that's really kind of at the heart of it. That's what I, hope to get to with my clients is, let's focus on these health promoting behaviors. Let's kind of take that, the burden of focusing on the number on the scale. Let's take that off the plate and kind of hopefully relieve some anxiety and stress, and really focus again on those health promoting behaviors. So again, that question, that they can ask is, what would you recommend if I was in a smaller body size? And you might get a great profound answer. It might not be the best answer, but I think that's at least a good way to kind of open the door to having that conversation.
Yeah, that sounds like excellent advice. Very well said.
Thank you.
Very well
Thank
said.
you.
Yes, calm it down.
Yes. Yes.
um,
Because, like I said, the last thing we want is to just decide we're giving up on going to the doctor's office, because we don't want that either.
right, exactly. So I like that there are some real steps that people can take, to get the support that they need. So I love that.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you.
So earlier in the conversation, you brought up a concept called non-diet. And I'm like,
Mhm.
what is a non-diet? Like we hear of you have a diet, not a non-diet.
Yes.
And I think that's something that a lot of people probably haven't heard of either. So can you explain to us what is this non-diet concept?
Yes, definitely. So the idea of a non-diet approach is that we're not following any specific rigid diet. So we're not cutting out food groups. We aren't sticking to a certain number of calories per day. Obviously, we don't want to go overboard on that, but we also want to be listening to our hunger and fullness cues. We want to be paying attention to how our body feels after we eat a meal. My sister always talks about this, and I think this is such a great example that when she eats too much sugar at night, the next morning she wakes up with a migraine. And so paying attention to the way food makes us feel. So instead of giving morality to food, calling them good foods or bad foods, that kind of thing, we're really focused more on the way that our body is feeling. And I really think what's helpful about that approach is it allows us to get back to enjoying food. It allows us to listen to our body and pay more attention to our body. And what I found with my clients is the ones that really have gone, headfirst into this approach and are used to listening to their body. They're able to kind of listen to their body in more ways than just, am I hungry or am I full? They really get to know their body really well, which I think allows them to be a really great advocate for themselves. So when we're talking about, going to the doctor's office and having concerns that you want to bring up with the doctor, I think when we are mindful about how our body is feeling, we are able to be such a much better advocate and explain in detail what we are feeling and what we're going through.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think the concept makes a lot of sense, and I take that approach. I've never called it
Mhm.
non-diet before, but I'm like, it's exactly
Yep.
that, allowing people to eat foods that are going to support them, support their health, and get them to the goals that they want. But I think some people might have a question, how, if they were to adopt a non-diet approach to their eating, how can they still make sure that they're making
Mhm.
adequate progress towards achieving their health goals? I mean, because you talked a lot about listening to your body, which is an
Mhm.
important thing, but it can take time to figure your body out and to learn those
Yes.
things, especially if, we're the type who has been suppressing things and ignoring it. And I've been ignoring my joint pain. And I've been ignoring
Mhm.
all these symptoms I've been having. It could take a
Totally.
while for someone to gain that awareness. So how can somebody be confident that if I just freestyle this, and it's not really freestyle. I know it's not,
Yep, yep.
but that might be the thought
Yes.
process. If I'm freestyling this diet, like how is this gonna work?
Yes, definitely. And I think something to kind of think about there is that we're not kind of getting to that place overnight. There is a lot of unlearning that we have to do from diet culture and diet mentality. And so the way that I like to work with my clients is really first working on kind of the nutrition education piece. So the very first thing that we always start with is balancing blood sugar and insulin levels. I think regardless of kind of where you are on the insulin sensitivity to resistance scale, there is work to be done there. And I think whether you have PCOS or not, I think it's an important thing to kind of understand how to best support, our insulin levels. The next thing we talk about is inflammation and gut health. So we're really focused on making sure that we're getting plenty of whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean meats, lots of omega 3s, great things like that. And so we start really with kind of learning kind of the basics of nutrition education and those foods that are going to promote our health, promote us feeling good, all of that. And then as we kind of work our way through that, we're getting more and more into that non diet approach. So, listening to the hunger and fullness cues. It's really important to understand that when our hormones are out of balance, especially that insulin level, it's going to be really hard to listen to our hunger and fullness cues, right? So, our body's going to be telling us like, go to the pantry and find every carb that's in there and eat all of them, right? That's the way that insulin is supposed to kind of work, that kind of cascade of effects. And so by kind of working on the insulin piece, the inflammation, the gut health first, it allows us to kind of calm down some of those reactions in our body to the point that we can start to learn and start to listen to those hunger and fullness cues. The other thing that kind of goes along with that non diet approach that I like to think about is a concept called gentle nutrition. And it is one of the principles of intuitive eating. And you can think about it kind of like a Venn diagram. So one of the circles is our nutrition education and everything that we know about, good healthy eating. So eating to support our inflammation, to support our gut, to support those hormone levels, especially the insulin. And then the other circle is kind of our food preferences. So what are our favorite foods? What are our cultural foods? What are some traditional foods? So we think especially, what are we eating around the holidays and with our family and kind of those special foods. And when we put those circles together, kind of like a Venn diagram, the center really is what I think of as gentle nutrition. So it's kind of the combination of both. So there is a learning piece and kind of figuring out kind of some basic nutrition 101, if you will. But once we kind of get to that point, we can pull from both circles to say, okay, I know that I might be craving a plate of pasta. And as much as I would love it for it to be just, the pasta and maybe some butter and Parmesan cheese, I know that is not going to support my body, my health, my hormone levels. So, can I add some, meatballs on top or meat sauce? And can I have a side salad so that I'm getting some vegetables in there too? And when we think from kind of that place in the middle, almost kind of like that gray area, if you will, we're able to listen to what our body is telling us we want without kind of totally going down that rabbit hole and sending our blood sugar on that roller coaster and just kind of perpetuating that pattern. And so there is, like I said, some kind of learning to be done up front. And at that point, it's my job to be implementing the non-diet approach, to be helping people work through kind of, challenging the food police and remembering that, no food is good or bad. No food is going to make or break your health. And as we kind of work to kind of get our health back on track, then that is when I turn it over to the client to start listening to their body. Because you're exactly right. It's hard to listen to our body right up front. And we are so conditioned and have learned to just kind of suppress that voice in our head, like you were saying with the joint pain, to kind of take it completely away from nutrition. It's like, I don't have time to go to the doctor. I don't have the money to go see a doctor or to, go to PT to address this. So I'm just going to ignore it. We're so used to doing that. And so it's really about bringing our awareness back into our body so that we can treat it the way that it wants to be treated.
Yeah, that's really fantastic because everything you're saying is kind of right on point, and I want to know, because I think people might be wondering, like, how long does the process take? How long do I have to
Yep.
be learning these things?
Yes.
Like, is it going to take 2 weeks? Is it going to take 2 months, 2 years? Like, how long before I can figure these things out? Because
Totally.
I think people are afraid of that uncertainty and, just that fear of the unknown. It's like, and nobody likes to not be good at something.
Definitely.
And we're not going to get the diet perfectly or the non-diet perfectly.
Yes.
We're perfect up front. And so this is what I try and teach my clients, and it sounds like you do the exact same thing, to not worry about the mistakes.
Yes.
Or, choosing to have something if you choose to do so. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not going to make or break the whole thing, like you said.
Definitely.
So how do people kind of navigate that, and what can they expect? Like, how long is it going to take to learn this? And I know it's going to be different, but how long would you say it in general?
Yeah. So kind of the whole process overall can take up to several months. But one of my favorite things is that by kind of starting to implement these small but impactful changes, a lot of times my clients will see some improvements within 2 weeks of starting this. And I'm sure you probably see this as well. If something as simple as eating a high protein breakfast versus as opposed to, just eating or just drinking coffee and kind of, hoping for the best for the rest of the day. Within those 2 weeks, somebody will come back to me and be like, wow, I feel so much better. Like I'm not nearly as tired. I don't feel like I need to go take a nap at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So the whole thing is, like you said, a learning process, and there's always going to be lessons that we're learning. And so I like to remind people that instead of, getting really down on ourselves and feeling like, I've fallen off the wagon, I'm just going to quit until, next Monday or the next week or next month. We're going to say, that probably wasn't, the best decision. That wasn't something that made me feel my best, but that's okay. I can make a different decision at the next snack or meal. And I think this really comes into play when we're talking about like eating out or vacation. And, when we think of a traditional diet approach, it can be really, really stressful because it's like, oh my gosh, I'm at this restaurant and I have no control over, what is on the menu, and I need to make sure that I get it exactly right. And instead, we want to shift that mindset to say, I'm going to make the best decision that I can. I'm going to make a decision to eat something that looks good to me, that I know is going to help me feel good. And if it's not something that makes me feel my best, that's okay. I'm learning from that. And, say that was lunchtime, at dinner time, I'm going to shift my approach so that I can make sure that I'm feeling better. Because at the end of the day, when we think about, those strict, rigid diets, I ask my clients all the time, are you really never going to go out to eat again, or never have a piece of cake at your birthday, or take, a special little one in your life out for coffee, not for coffee, for ice cream? And the answer to that obviously is no. And so instead of thinking of those moments of falling off the wagon and failure and, I have to start over, we're going to incorporate that into our life, enjoy it, and then move on. And I think too, another thing that's great about that is it really helps with our stress levels too, which, we know is has such a big impact on our health as well, that just really doesn't need to be something that we're stressing about and spending tons of time thinking about, and you know have spending our anxiety on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because there's only so much you can do, and like you said, there's no
Hmm.
perfect eating plan and those sorts of things. So, we do what we can and we improve over time. So, yeah, I
Hmm.
like that. That
Definitely.
sounds like the key to it, and planning for those special occasions and understanding that
Yes.
you can enjoy yourself and you don't have to completely deprive yourself at all times, because to me that makes a
Yes.
an eating plan not sustainable. This is life, it's for enjoying
Hmm.
also. We want to
Yes.
be healthy and feel our best, and I think the food and the eating has a big part to do with that, but we want to enjoy ourselves too.
Definitely, definitely, because we know that socialization and connecting with others and, having a good laugh over, a big dinner is important for our health too.
Absolutely. So now I want to know, what advice might you have for someone who may be struggling with kind of body acceptance issues and thoughts, and kind of
Mm.
bending to the societal pressures to conform to a certain body type and body
Mhm.
image. They're like, this isn't going to work for me. No, I want to be super strict. Like, but how
Mhm.
do we kind of break through that mindset to make a shift to get to a more balanced type of process or living for them?
Yeah, and I think this is a really tricky one, and one that it can be so difficult for so many people. So I hold a lot of grace and empathy for people that are struggling with that. But I think getting to a point of feeling kind of neutral about our body. I think, if we think of diet and diet culture on one side, there's kind of this other side of the spectrum that talks all about like body love and body positivity and loving our body. And I think what's important to remember is that we don't necessarily have to love our body to, treat it well, to be healthy. So we can move more to a place of body neutrality, and that, when we really think about things like our core values. Is the size and shape of our body really on that list? And I don't believe it is for most people. And so kind of thinking about that and really digging deep into, what is important to me? Is it the size and shape of my body, or is it my health? And kind of being able to kind of tease that out and distinguish between those two when we think about things like lab results, we think about the way our body feels. If we're feeling good, that's really all that matters. And I think a lot of times when we are in a place where we're dieting and we're seeking weight loss, a certain number on the scale, a certain size and shape of our body, it's really because we feel like that's what's going to make us feel our best. And if we can do that, in a different way, that might be a way to kind of relieve ourselves of some of the stress and the pressure of, having to look this exact way. And so it's really, to me, it's kind of about thinking about what really truly is my goal, and working towards that as opposed to feeling like, there is one way that my body has to look and everything else is considered failure. Because really, I don't know about you, but to me that just feels exhausting and feels kind of like a non-winnable battle.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And like you said, all that mental and emotional pressure and stress that,
Hmm.
some people put on themselves, it's like, yeah, let's not go there. Let's be kind to ourselves and gentle to ourselves.
Yes.
Let's think in more those terms. And because, like you said, those stress hormones of
Hmm.
the thought processes and kind of the obsessing on one particular thing, like this number on the scale has changed,
Hmm.
or, my waist size needs to be X, it's like, no, we
Yeah.
have to kind of calm it down, because it's like we can't really change that. We could change our behaviors, we could change
Hmm.
our actions, but we can't force the scale to change. I mean, I guess you could do some things that would be pretty
Yes.
out there, but
Yes.
but if we want to do this the natural way, then it's like we can focus on other things, and
Hmm.
creating a more serene life at the same time, instead of the stress and all the anxiety that goes along with those types of thoughts.
Definitely.
So, I want to know, from your perspective, do you think there are things that we can do as individuals to kind of help change this conversation and dialogue about weight and health in our society and around food and dieting? Because I think, the predominant culture is very unhealthy in the mindset. And so I think that's where a
Hmm.
lot of these things come from, and how a lot of people are getting caught up into some unhealthy type behaviors around food and body image and all that. So, if there's anything that kind of as individuals we can do to contribute to a healthier conversation.
Definitely. I think one of the biggest things that we can do is really calling out diet culture when we see it. I think there is a commercial going on in the area where I live right now that I believe is for cool sculpting. And it is all about, there's something that they say of like, if you can squeeze it, you can freeze it, or something like that. And I think about the fact my daughter is 10 months old, so she has no idea what the commercial is saying. What I think about, well, what happens when she's 10 years old and she's seeing something like that? And obviously we're not at that place yet, so I can't say for sure what I would do in the future. But when I think about it now, one of the things that I would like to do is just kind of call it out and have a conversation with her about it, and kind of say, just because you can, squeeze some area on your body doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. The list goes on and on. And I think, to me, calling it out for ourselves and calling it out for others if we feel comfortable. And then also, too, for me, what's really important is not passing down kind of that generational trauma or thought process, because we know that so often, especially as women, we learn diet culture and body negativity. We learn it from our moms and our grandmothers and our aunts and sisters and female cousins. We learn it from others that are, very close to us. And so making a conscious effort to not pass that down to the next generation is something that's really, really important to me. And so I think whether you're calling it out to someone else, you're having a conversation with them, or you're just kind of calling it out to yourself to say, you know what, I don't need to internalize this message, whatever it is. I'm doing what I need to support my body and my health, and I feel confident with that. I think that's something that's really important and really powerful, is when we know we are doing everything in our power to support ourselves. There's not really much more we can ask.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And what I want to know, if somebody is at that place personally where they do want to improve their relationship with food and with their body, what are some of the first steps they can take in order to start doing that? Are there any tips or recommendations that you would have for that?
Definitely. So I would look into the principles of intuitive eating. So one of the big ones that I've mentioned a whole lot here is kind of rejecting that diet mentality. So when we have, a kind of an overly diety thought that comes into our brain, calling it out for what it is and saying, you know what, that doesn't have to be the narrative. That doesn't have to be what I think about this food or this meal or whatever it is. And then I think too, working with a registered dietitian who takes that intuitive eating, non-diet, health at every size approach, and or a mental health professional to help you kind of work through those thoughts. So I think when we're talking about really changing our food patterns, a dietitian is going to be really helpful, but also to acknowledging that our thoughts are really powerful, and having a mental health professional that can help us work through, our thought process and really change our thought process, whether it's about food or something else. I think that can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, that's really good advice, especially if somebody's really struggling to kind of break through that barrier, because it can be hard. Like the thoughts and the mental side of things are kind of the hardest things to change. It's like,
Definitely.
how do I change my mind? I don't know how to think differently about
Yes.
it.
Hmm. Definitely. I was just saying, in our culture and society, like trying to step away from diet culture really truly can feel like you're swimming upstream. And so it is really hard. And so seeking out that support, in whatever way makes sense for you, I think is really important as well.
Right. And I would just encourage people, like, don't beat yourself up about it, because
Hmm.
there's so many little things set up against you. So,
Yes.
it's like the whole system is set up for you to fail almost, except for Ellison here and other people who are there to support you.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I think with the evidence that other people are able to do it and accomplish their goals and kind of overcome that, it's kind of encouraging for other people that they can do it too.
Yes, most definitely. And just know that there is support out there at many different levels. And so, seeking that out, I think, is really helpful.
Oh yeah. So I want to know, are there any final thoughts you want to leave with us today? Like, is there anything that you really want the listeners to know about eating or PCOS or what you do, or, what do we need to know?
Yeah, so I think kind of two final thoughts. One, if you've never heard more about PCOS, hopefully today you learned a little bit more about it, and I would encourage you to um, go do your own research and learn about it, because as you mentioned earlier in the show, it is really common, and chances are you at least know someone with it. If not, you might even learn more about it and think, this might be something I should talk to my doctor about for myself. And then, as far as just eating and nutrition in general, I think reiterating that thought that there's no one food that's going to make or break your health. I think so often we're conditioned to think that we have to eat absolutely perfectly, or else we're destined for all these diseases and health concerns. And fortunately or unfortunately, it's just not that simple. And so, there absolutely is a way that we can eat to support our health and also enjoy what we're eating, and not completely deprive ourselves of that enjoyment that food can provide. And so if somebody is looking for, support, or wants to continue the conversation, I would encourage them to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat, whether they have PCOS or not. obviously, as a dietitian, very passionate about food and nutrition and could talk about it all day long.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Ellison, for being here today and for sharing
Absolutely.
so many wonderful insights. I mean, it
Thank
sounds
you.
amazing. I'm like, I'm hungry now. I want
Yes.
to know what you want me to eat.
Definitely. As I say, well, we're having tacos for dinner if that helps at all. So Mexican night here.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know what I'm having for dinner yet. That'll be an interesting thought. So if people want to know more info on how they can reach out to you, where can they find you at?
Definitely. So they can find me online at Happy Hormones with an S, dietitian.com. So dietitian is Dietitian and Happy Hormones Dietitian on Instagram. So that's probably where I spend the most of my time. So feel free to come send me a message and continue the conversation there.
Fantastic. Thank you again so much. And I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in today and hearing what Miss Ellison had to share with us about PCOS and non-diets and HAES and everything that we learned today. So I hope that everyone enjoyed this episode and learned something new. And remember that taking care of your health does not have to be stressful. Not at all. Embracing a holistic and intuitive approach can absolutely help you achieve the results that you want without feeling caught in a sea of overwhelm. So to me, that was one of the biggest takeaways from today. And always remember that even small changes can really have a big impact on your health. So I would definitely encourage you to take action and implement some of the tips and the strategies that you learned today. And as always, I want to hear from you. So if you have any ideas that you think would be great for a show in the future, go to thedocmoshow.com and let me know. And also join me next week for another episode of The DocMo Show, where I'll be sharing more tips and insights to help you thrive and feel your best naturally. This has been DocMo. Thanks so much for being here. And until next time, stay well, everybody. Bye-bye.